So the Unplanned movie has come out and I haven't had a chance to see it, and I don't know when I'm gonna get a chance to see it. So I figured in honor of it coming out, I might as well talk about my own Planned Parenthood experience. And maybe if you watch the movie and you start seeing a few similarities to my experience, I understand that when a person's telling a story and when you're making a movie, and also just when you have a specific set of beliefs, like a really strongly held set of beliefs, it's really easy to fall into this pattern of framing things in a good versus evil context where it's like, this is good and this is evil. I don't know if the movie does that. I don't know if they make their villains into kind of caricatures just a little bit. Maybe those caricatures are a little more accurate than people would like to think. I don't know because I haven't seen the movie, but I do know that my own experience was pretty negative. A quick caveat, I'm not saying that all Planned Parenthoods are like this one. It was just, it wasn't a particularly good experience that I had at all. First thing that I had a problem with was I was pretty far along in my pregnancy. So when I called them asking for an abortion, like in our state, there's a cutoff at 20 weeks. And so I thought, okay, well, I should be able to get an abortion up until 20 weeks. I was at, oh my goodness, I was like at 15 weeks at that point, 15 or 16. And when I called them up, they scheduled me for an abortion at one place. Well, first they told me they couldn't help me at all. And I was like, there's got to be something. There's got to be something that I can do, And then they were like, well, we can try scheduling you at one place. And so they scheduled me at one place that was like 3 hours down the road. And I was like, okay, good. We're set. We're scheduled. This is good. Then a little while later, they had told me someone was going to call me up to ask about my insurance. No one ever did. So I called them back to schedule, to ask them about my insurance. And the lady on the phone was like, oh, they shouldn't have scheduled here. This place won't see you. You're too far along. So I'm going to cancel your appointment right now. It was like, great. Now what am I supposed to do? So she found me another appointment in another town, also rather far away. I'm trying not to give too many details because even though I don't like the place, I don't want to like pinpoint like the specific location. She scheduled me for like the very next day at that place. So I called my husband up and the two of us, like he canceled work that day. The two of us got into the car and we drove all the way out to this place. So that was a little upsetting, like just the fact that, it was up in the air. First, we can't help you, then we can't help you, then we can't help you again, then we can't help you. So scheduling an abortion was not necessarily the best. And I think that changes from state to state. Our state is not particularly open to abortion. So, I don't know. There aren't that many clinics in my home state. And I was like trying to look up other places in my state, and there don't seem to be very many. In the city where we live, the abortion, there was a Planned Parenthood and it had gotten closed down. And so now they're advertising some new clinic that's opening up. And I'm kind of tempted to go there and just check it out and see what it's like, because the the one that we went to, the Planned Parenthood we went to, was pretty not so good. We drove out there, we arrived there, and they had their logo like printed on the doors of the lobby, and it was like care no matter what or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, that's nice, because we're screwed, this happened to us and we don't really have a roadmap to follow, and nobody seems particularly eager to help us get to where we're trying to go. So, care no matter what sounds like a pretty nice thing right about this point. And so we went in, and I mean, there was the bulletproof glass everywhere, and I don't have any complaints about that. That makes sense. We signed in, we sat down in the lobby. I started to cry because my baby was dying. I wasn't like noisy crying, but I definitely had tears running down my face, and I couldn't exactly stop them. It was just like, yeah, my baby's gonna die, and I'm here, and I'm fat, and I'm pregnant, and I'm sitting in an abortion clinic, and what else can I what else can I do? I mean, this wasn't something I asked for. This wasn't something that could be avoided. You know, it wasn't like I was being irresponsible. We just got struck by lightning. Like, it just happened. So, you know, I was pretty upset. We actually got a call while we were in the waiting room from our doctor to call us up and confirm for certain that it was trisomy 18, because we'd done the screening, we'd done the ultrasound. We had not yet gotten the results from the amniocentesis back, but we weren't at that clinic at that time to have the abortion. We were there for the consultation to figure out, okay, this is what the procedure is, this is what's going to happen, you know, all that information. So that's all we were there for. And then after you have that consultation in our state, there's a 24-hour waiting period so that you can change your mind if you want to. And so we were there for that. And that was good. You know, I wanted to know about the procedure. I wanted to know what kind of procedure they were going to do, because there are different kinds of procedures. I wanted to know if there was anything I could do to minimize any discomfort that my son might experience, or, I wanted to make sure that he was taken care of. And so we're waiting in the waiting room, and we get the call, and sure enough, the amniocentesis came back, and it was definitely trisomy 18. So, you know, we had that little teeny flicker of hope that we've been holding on to, like, well, maybe, you know, I remember asking my husband, like, what else could it be at this point? He's like, well, maybe it's a midget with a heart defect. I was like, I'd take a midget with a heart defect. I would love that, you know? There was that moment where you imagine, like, this little teeny kid who's, you know, got a case of dwarfism or something, and, you know, running around in the yard with the other kids and just being a kid and being alive. And it's like, oh, that would be wonderful, but that didn't happen for us. So we're waiting in the waiting room, and I'm trying not to cry quite so much. And they called my name, and I went up. My husband went up with me. And they asked us to pay. We paid. My husband paid. I was trying to keep him with me as much as possible, because I was noticing a lot of the women were just going in alone. It's like, well, you know, that's cool, but I want him with me. You know, this is our kid. They called me in for my appointment, and the two of us went up. I took him with me. And the nurse said, I'm sorry, you know, you can't go past this point. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, when can he join me? Because this is the consultation, you know, when can he join me? And she's like, he can't. And my husband was like, well, I'm the father of this child. And she's like, I'm sorry, sir, we have a policy. And she looked annoyed, like, really, she looked annoyed. And so, you know, both of us were like, yeah, that's really not okay. Is there anyone we can talk to? And she's like, well, if you want to talk to the manager, I'll get the manager. I was like, okay, yes, we would like to talk to the manager. First time in my life I have ever asked to talk to the manager, but okay, you know, may we speak to the manager? So she had us wait out in the lobby again. And the manager comes down and calls us back to the back area. And so we're standing, you know, just through the door of the lobby. Like, they would let him through the door of the lobby to, like, pay the money or to talk to the manager, but they wouldn't let him any farther than that. And so the two of us are back there. We're talking to the manager, and she's like, there's a policy. He's not allowed back here. I was like, you know, why is there a policy like that? Like, are there any exceptions to the rule? And she was like, the only exception is for minors and legal guardians. And I was like, okay, well, what legal paperwork do I have to sign to make him into my legal guardian? Because I will sign away all of my rights as long as my husband gets to be there for that consultation. It is that important to us. And she was just kind of shaking her head saying, I'm sorry, there's just a policy. And my husband, eventually, he just kind of got tired, and he said, you know, he told her she was a horrible person. He wasn't wrong. She really didn't seem like your caring type. You know, she was definitely a bureaucrat. Just, you know, constantly with the repeating of, I'm sorry, there's a policy. That's just our policy. It's just our policy, you know. So eventually my husband, he turns around, he walks out, and I'm sitting there in this back area with this lady, and I look at her and I was like, well, can you at least tell me why that's your policy? And she was like, it's just our policy. And then she told me that we'd missed our turn because we'd been arguing with them, and I had to go back out to the lobby and wait. So I went back out to the lobby, and I was waiting with my husband again. I didn't know this about abortion clinics, but I guess a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them seem to run on this like conveyor belt sort of system where everybody goes through the same process, and you go in and you go through the process, and then they call the next person, and you don't necessarily come in for an appointment like at a doctor's office. They have you, it's a clinic, I guess clinics tend to be like that, but they basically just call your name for your turn, and then they shoot you through the conveyor. And so by questioning them or by having any kinds of issues, I was slowing down their conveyor belts, and they were not happy with us. And I wasn't particularly happy with them. I mean, I went online after all this happened, and I went to this forum for like women's issues, and I was like, hey, this happened, and it was really upsetting to us. And people came out of the woodwork just all over the place saying, oh, there's a million reasons, it was for the patient's privacy. It was in case you were being coerced into getting an abortion. It was in case of, it was for safety reasons. I mean, all these different reasons that my husband might not have been allowed into the back area of Planned Parenthood. And that's really nice and all, but how come people on the internet are so willing to tell me the reasons for that policy, but the people at the clinic at the time that I was there wouldn't tell me anything? Like, I had a concern. Maybe they didn't think it was a particularly reasonable concern, but I was clearly pretty upset about it, and they clearly didn't care that I was upset. They didn't care that I had a problem with it. They didn't care about me. Like, there was a very high level of not giving a darn in that facility. So I'm out in the lobby with my husband. He's the calmer of the two of us, and so I'm sitting there and I'm just shaking my head, and I'm like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And he's talking to me just kind of quietly, like, just calm down. We're going to get through this. We're probably not going to have the procedure here, but we do need the consultation to start the 24-hour waiting period. One thing that was kind of causing all this to happen was that we were aware that there was a 20-week cutoff for abortions in our state. And that 20 weeks comes up real fast. In fact, we were very lucky because we found out before 20 weeks that there was a problem with the pregnancy instead of at 20 weeks, which gave us a little bit more time, a little more wiggle room. And apparently, somewhere in the laws in our state, there is a clause for cases of fetal non-viability, which we qualified for. We found that out after we had our abortion because nobody took the time to sit down and say, well, you have some time because this is a case where your child will not survive. Nobody did that, like until the end, like right until the end. And then it was the doctor who performed the procedure, and she was very patient and very kind and very informative, and she took time to tell us, to answer all of our questions, which was really fantastic. But we didn't get them answered at the Planned Parenthood. So we're sitting in the lobby. I'm upset. My husband's trying to talk me down. They called my name again. Same nurse as the first time. She calls my name. I'm really not happy. My husband tells me that I have to go. I grab his arm, kind of give it a squeeze. I get up, I walk across the lobby, and I walk into the back room past the nurse. I am not smiling. I am not happy. It's like, okay, fine. You guys have your rules. You're going to make me play your game your way. That doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. And so I'm just standing there. It's like, okay, you tell me where to go, I'll go. And the nurse calls my name. I turn around and look at her, and she says, go back into the lobby. And so I walked back out of the back area into the lobby. And my husband gives me this look like, what? What happened this time? And I looked at him and I was like, I wasn't happy enough. I wasn't happy enough. And that's why they sent me back out again. And at this point, I'm thinking, it really seemed to me at that time that the nurse was playing power games with me. Like, that was really my impression, that she was trying to, I don't know what her deal was. And I mean, I'm sure, and I mean, this was the reaction that I got when I talked about it on that women's forum. It was like, well, you were being rude to her. It's like, by not smiling? by looking like I was upset. I was being rude to her, and they were like, well, they were sending you back out so that you could calm down and so that you could feel better. It's like, yeah, you're sending me back out to my husband so that I can calm down and feel better, just so that you can separate me from my husband later. Like, it just didn't make any kind of sense. But, you know, I had to wait for the next turn on the conveyor belt. And when that turn came, my husband, of course, is talking me down some more. You know, you really, really need to play nice here. You need to play politic. You need to behave yourself, like be an adult here. And I'm just shaking my head again going, you know what, this is not okay. This is not okay at all. And so after a few minutes, I'm just sitting there kind of, at that point, like if you're really, really upset, sometimes you kind of start to feel a little bit numb. And I was there. I was starting to feel a little bit numb. And I'm just sitting there and I'm kind of staring out the window and I'm just mumbling, you know, murmuring to my husband, I'm never going to forget this. I'm never going to forget this place. I'm never going to forget this. And so they call my name and I go up and I put a big fake smile on my face and I walk up to the nurse, new nurse this time. For all I know, she was security. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she was security. Like, I don't know what was going on with those people, but I think that normally people don't question them at all. Like, nobody there had any kind of problem with them. And yeah, apparently there were other couples that had not wanted to be separated, that they had still separated, and those couples, I guess, hadn't had better options, so they just kind of dealt with it. And I've watched numerous like women telling their stories about their own abortions, like giving like little, this was my experience kinds of videos and stories. And no woman who's ever been separated from her partner when this is happening seems to have a really positive, emotional reaction to being separated from her partner when this is happening. But anyway, you know, I go back and I greet the nurse and I'm smiling and I'm like, hi, how are you? Lovely weather we're having, you know, just trying to be happy and chipper and all that. And it's like, my baby is going to die. There's nothing I can do to save him. I'm being separated from my husband. He's not being treated like a human being or even really acknowledged by any of the staff as a human being. And like, blonde nurse over there is trying to play power games with me and kicking me out every time I don't look happy enough. It's like, yeah, this is a great time. I'm enjoying myself a lot in your facility. Thank you very much. So they take me back and they give me my ultrasound, and I'm trying really hard to make polite conversation with them, and neither one of them is a talker. And I'm not happy at all. Like, I'm trying to be polite and friendly, and it's the best I can do, like customer service wise, because I feel like I have to do customer service for these assholes. And yes, they were, sorry, forgive my language, but they were jerks, you know. I'm sorry. You in what world do you treat a human being like that, especially when they're going through something kind of traumatic, you know? But whatever, they do the ultrasound. They asked me if I wanted a picture. I didn't want a picture because I was actually really concerned at that point in time that if I saw him, I'd notice like some of the potential deformities that can come with trisomy 18. And I was trying to explain that to them, that, you know, this was kind of a necessary situation. There was nothing we could do to keep him alive. And I wanted to ask them, like, can I please have my husband with me for the consultation? But I knew I wasn't going to get anything out of them. And I also knew that if I questioned them in any way, they'd kick me right back out to the lobby again. So I was trying to kind of keep my mouth shut on any issues or problems that I might have, which isn't exactly a good situation to be in with a medical care provider. Like, if you're receiving medical care and you have medical problems, the last thing you want to be doing is keeping your mouth shut about things that you think are important or complaints that you might have. Just saying. So they take me to a new interior lobby and they leave me there waiting alone. Still separated from my husband. So I whip out my cell phone and I start texting him like, hey, I'm in an interior lobby. I don't know what's going on. They told me to wait here. And, you know, he texted me back and, you know, let me know that he was there sitting in his lobby. And so we're sitting in our two separate lobbies waiting for time to pass. And I went online and I started reading through the abortion stories of other women who had trisomy 18. And they were always, you know, oh, the nurses were so sympathetic and so kind, and the doctor was so sympathetic, and, You know, they, like a lot of these women, they're later on in their pregnancy, so they actually have to go through the process of giving birth because the baby in there is so big that there's no other way to do it. And so a lot of these women had to give birth to stillborn babies. And they were talking about how, you know, how very kind and helpful the nurses were. And I'm just sitting there like, here I am at the Planned Parenthood, which I'm starting to realize is the Walmart of abortion care, you know. And I mean, my husband and I stopped at a McDonald's on our road trip to get to this place, and the McDonald's they had so much nicer customer service at a McDonald's than they did at Planned Parenthood. And I mean, by that point, like sitting in the interior lobby, I was starting to think that I was in a prison. Like I was starting to really feel like I was in some sort of prison, and that's not good. Like I really felt like I was being treated like a prison inmate. And, you know, I really felt like I had accidentally dropped into some episode of Orange is the New Black, only instead of being like the naive blonde protagonist who's like always trying to treat the place like it's a country club, it's me. It's me, and I'm in this weird Planned Parenthood prison place, and the nurses don't even treat me like a human being, and they don't even acknowledge that my husband exists, and somehow I've got to go through all this. This isn't a good situation. There was nothing good about that place. Like, it was not good. And everybody there, except maybe the second nurse who finally guided me into the back area, like she seemed pretty okay. Everybody else that was there gave off a very, very strong impression of I just don't care. The manager just did not care. The first nurse, the blonde nurse, did not care. Did not care one bit. You know, I was pretty upset, especially that they were separating me from my husband, especially because of the circumstances around our situation, and they didn't care. They didn't care at all. They could not care less. And so when I was on this women's forum after all this happened, I was like, hey, these people were very indifferent. They were like the living definition of indifferent. And everybody told me that I was seeing things, that I was imagining things, that I was just blowing it all out of proportion, that those nurses were saints for dealing with someone as unpleasant and demanding as I am. You know, there are a lot of things you can say about me, but unpleasant and demanding, generally, if I'm in some sort of customer service like setting where either I'm giving customer service or I'm receiving customer service of some kind, I'm usually pretty agreeable. This was the first time in my entire life that I ever had this kind of a reaction to anything. This was the first time I ever was like, yes, I would like to speak to the manager. This was the first time, I don't know, this was the first time I ever, like, this was just a weird situation. Like, I've been to clinics before, like back when I was younger and I was poor and I was single, like I would go to clinics for, you know, any kind of health issue. There was this like free clinic downtown, and I would go down there, and, you know, I'd sit in the lobby, and there would be people all over the place, and they'd call you, you know, on your rotation, and I'd go in, and they treated me like a human being there. I mean, it was a clinic, but they still treat you like you're a human being. This place treated me like I was a prisoner. Like, I really felt like I was rapidly losing control over my health and well-being. And let me just very carefully, I've had some things happen to me in the past that weren't so great. I've had situations where people had control over me who didn't care about me, didn't care about my health and well-being, and I nearly died. And so, you know, this took me back to a really, really not good place in my life. And so it would be very, very easy for me to look at this and say, well, or for an outsider, easy for an outsider to look at this situation and say, well, you're having flashbacks, you're psychologically damaged, you have all this previous trauma in your history that's maybe affecting the way you interpret this situation. And that would be reasonable. So, you know, I mean, I know this about myself. So the first thing I do is I talk to my husband after we got out of there, and I was like, look, were you getting the same vibe I was getting from this place? Like, was it just me? Was I just overreacting, or were they really acting like this? And he was like, no, they were really acting like this. And I was like, okay. Okay, so it wasn't just me. This is the way they were treating us. Then I went online and I looked at like their Google reviews and stuff. Horrible reviews. Horrible reviews. There was a person who went in and they got tested for an STD and never heard back from Planned Parenthood, this particular Planned Parenthood facility. Never heard back from them. Finally called them up like, hey, I'd really like to hear about this STD test I took. And they were like, well, if you haven't heard back from us, then it means you're fine. So they eventually went to a different place, got tested. They had the STD. And apparently it was a pretty severe one that you wouldn't want to be like spreading around to the rest of the world. Never did hear back from that Planned Parenthood. There were a few people who had complaints about this place. It wasn't just me. There is definitely, it was not a good facility. And I mean, on that same note, there are many different Planned Parenthood facilities. I'm sure that some of them are quite lovely. It was just that this one was not. And I don't know what the other ones look like because I've never been to them, but this one definitely was not. And, you know, with that history that I have, with the experiences that I've had, I'm very alert to people who have power over me, who seem like they don't care. Because there have been too many situations where I've been in danger or where I have nearly died as a result of people who had power over me who simply did not care. Usually people of a bureaucratic nature who simply could not be bothered to do the extra paperwork to prevent the things that were happening to me from happening for me. And that was the impression I got. Like, that was the very strong impression I got. And it really rubbed me the wrong way. Because I'm looking at it and it's like, okay, this is a medical care facility. I just had an ultrasound in this medical care facility. I don't feel comfortable enough with the nurses and the staff in this facility to ask them a question about a problem that I have because I'm afraid that they're going to kick me back out to the lobby again. What happens if I have a complication from this procedure? What happens if something goes wrong? Who do I talk to for help? Not the ladies who are going to kick me back out to the lobby. I'm not going to talk to them. So who do I go to for help here? If I need help, if I'm having some sort of a medical problem in this medical care facility. And I wrote about that on the forum. Like, I went onto this ladies forum. I wrote about that, you know, that series of thoughts, like these concerns that I had. And they're like, oh, come on, you know, abortion is about as, you know, abortion shouldn't be any more complicated than having a tooth pulled. You're overreacting. 90 to 93% of abortions happen in the first trimester. A woman finds out she's pregnant, doesn't want to be pregnant, goes into the abortion clinic, gets it all taken care of. Very, very low rate of complications in first trimester abortions, very low. I wasn't having a first trimester abortion. I was having a second trimester abortion. Whole different ballgame. When you have a second trimester abortion, you're having surgery. You're having a multi-day procedure. So the first day, they put the laminaria in, they begin to expand your cervix. It doesn't hurt the baby. It's just opening up the openings. That can be really painful, by the way. I won't say really painful, but it definitely does not feel good. And they have medication that they give you for it, but it's still not a fun time. Then again, I say that I didn't actually take all of the medication they gave me. They had an anti-anxiety drug and I didn't take it because I didn't feel particularly anxious and I didn't feel like I needed it. But it certainly put me on, I hung out on the couch for the rest of the day. You know, it's a very involved procedure. You know, there are a lot of things that can go wrong with a second trimester abortion. You can bleed to death. You know, they have to, second trimester is where they have to go in and remove a baby. Like, first trimester, it's still a baby, but it's a tiny baby. Second trimester, it's not a tiny baby. You know, they have to do stuff to get this thing out of you, and it's more complicated. So I really did have some very genuine concerns. And it was really depressing, like just sitting in that waiting room, reading through all these stories about all these women who had these wonderful, caring and sympathetic experiences. And, you know, I felt like I'd I felt like I was in some sort of hell. Anyway, eventually they come and get me out of the lobby. They take me to a little teeny medical room and told me to wait there. And I'm sitting there in this little teeny medical room, and, you know, there's the, like, in the corner there was the little, like, bench, the little, I mean, you find them in doctor's offices all the time. There's little benches with, like, the padding on them, and, you know, the little stirrups, and there was a jar of cotton swabs and crap, like just jars lined up, and everything was clean. It was neat and orderly. It looked a little bit worn and faded, but it was okay. I mean, it didn't look wrong. By that point, I was pretty stressed out. I was just sitting there thinking, you know what? I don't want my son to die here. That's all I care about. I don't want my son to die in this place. This is not a good place to die. I don't want my son dying here. And this woman came in, and I looked up at her, and she told me she was the CFO of the facility, and that at this time they would not be able to provide us with care because I'd made a scene in the lobby. And I remember just staring up at her, and by this point, all my emotions, all my feelings had just completely shut off, and I was in the room, but I wasn't really in me. And so I'm looking up at this woman, I'm looking through this woman, and eventually, you know, she repeated the question. I was like, just staring at her, and finally I said, you know, I don't think I want to be receiving that, you know, doing, what was it? I don't think I want to be working with you either today, or something like that. It was just very, very polite, but basically it was like, I don't want to have to deal with you either. I don't like you at all, any of you. So she escorts me out of the little medical room, and then we start going down the hallway. And we turn the corner, and I see my husband looking very, very confused. They brought him into the back so that he could swipe his credit card so that they could give him the refund for our time there. They hadn't told him anything at all. And so he sees me coming down the hallway. He looks at me with this just confused look on his face. And I was like, we're leaving. We're done. We are done here. He was like, what happened? I was like, they're telling us that we need to leave. And I was like, we'll go to the hospital, because there was a hospital in town we were trying to talk to. I was like, we'll go to the hospital. We'll talk to them. We're leaving this place. We are done here. He's like, okay. And, you know, the CFO starts telling me some line about how they're going to have their quality assurance people call me. And it's like, we are done here. We're done here. And we walked out quietly and got into the car. And we both, you know, closed our car doors, and it was just one of those moments where we're completely silent. And you know how in movies where you have that moment where, you know, something completely just blows up in the main character's face, and then later on somebody, you know, kind of quips, well, that could have gone better. We're sitting in the car, and it was like, well, that could have gone better. On the ride home, which was many hours, like not many hours, but it was a few hours to get home, I started cackling. Like, I started just laughing because I was so happy to be away from that place. I was like, I don't care what happens after this. As long as we never, ever go back to that facility, I'll be happy. Even if we have to follow the pregnancy to term, even if we have to watch the baby die, you know, alive, you know, be born alive and then die in my arms, anything is better than letting him die in that place. So, you know, that should be the end of the story, and that really is the end of the story, except then we found out that the doctor who'd be doing my procedure was affiliated with Planned Parenthood. And so, you know, as easy as it would be to make all Planned Parenthood facilities seem as horrible as that one was, and that one really, genuinely, I cannot express to you enough, very, very indifferent, did not care. I'm not going to say that all abortion care providers are bad, because I don't believe that they are. When we met with our doctor, she was extremely sympathetic, extremely caring, extremely kind. She took the time to sit with us and answer all of our questions. She met with both of us together. My husband was treated like a human being throughout the entire process. When I hemorrhaged, he was allowed to come back, and he actually, the hospital staff, this was awesome. I can't believe they did this. This is so cool. They let him come back while I was hemorrhaging and kind of peek in the curtain and, you know, tell me that everything was going to be okay. and he loved me, which I wanted to tell him, of course I'm going to be okay. But I was hemorrhaging and it was really difficult to speak. So I didn't get to say anything to him. Just, concentrate on holding on to your consciousness and get through it. But they were very, very kind to him. They had somebody sit and talk with him and tell him every single thing that was going on, every little development. They really didn't leave him alone while I was being stabilized. That means so much to me, because if they had not been able to stabilize me, I know he would have been okay as much as possible. When your spouse is dying, that's not the time to be just kind of left alone in a corner. Like, they did their best to take good care of him, and I really appreciate that deeply. Which brings me to another complaint that I had about the Planned Parenthood facility. I was a little bit odd online about how many women immediately rushed to Planned Parenthood's defense. I had mentioned in my original post on the forum, hey, I'm a little concerned because if I have any medical complications or any medical concerns, are the people at this particular facility, am I going to be able to go to them with these concerns? Am I going to be able to ask them questions about, any concerns that I have? Like, hemorrhages do happen. My own hemorrhage, it was a uterine atony. I developed uterine atony. There is no warning system for that. It's not because something went wrong with the procedure. It just happens. Like, it just happens. And you're screwed. And that's it. If that had happened to me at Planned Parenthood, who would I have gone to for help? Would they have told my husband that something was wrong? Would they have gone out to keep him updated on my condition? Would they have let him know at all? Would they have done anything like that? Well, they had already given every evidence that's up until that point, up until the point they kicked us out. Even when they did kick us out, they didn't tell him what was going on. That he was getting kicked out of the facility, and they still hadn't told him he was getting kicked out of the facility. That's not good. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, the doctor who gave us a procedure is affiliated with Planned Parenthood. She did a fantastic job. She was a fantastic doctor. I literally trusted her with my life, and she did a great job. Even with the hemorrhage, like, she was doing a really good job. The staff at the hospital did a really great job. They were kind to me. They were kind to my husband. They were kind to my son. They treated him as a human being, even if I know there's a lot of people who say it's just a fetus, and maybe they just believed it was just a fetus, but they treated him well because I wanted him treated well, and I believed that he should be treated well. And that's important to me. And they actually took the time to do that, and that means a lot. So I know that there are good doctors and good nurses and good people who work with Planned Parenthood. It happens. But the facility I went to, it was not a good facility. I have no idea why the CFO came to kick me out. There didn't seem to be much in the way of customer service at all. Their customer service representative, who was supposed to, their quality assurance person who was supposed to call us back, never called us back. Yeah, it was an extremely negative experience. So, if you do go and watch the movie Unplanned, all I saw a couple of reviews, and I've seen the commercials, and I saw a little spoiler trailer thing that was kind of cool. If you watch that movie and you're looking at it and thinking, gee, this is over the top, I kind of get the impression that, maybe the villain character, she might be a little too cold-hearted, a little too evil, maybe a little too over the top. I don't know, because I haven't seen the movie. There is a chance that they were being very true to life in the creation of that movie, because the place I went to, the Planned Parenthood facility that I went to, and I'm not saying all of them are like this, but the one I went to, it was not a good time. It was not a good situation. I didn't feel safe there, and I don't I don't know how well they would have treated me if I had hemorrhaged in that place. Like if I had gone through with the procedure there, I don't know how well they would have treated me. And I really don't think they would have done much for my husband to treat him well. I ended up needing a transfusion. I got a transfusion right there in the hospital. I don't believe Planned Parenthood is equipped to give transfusions to patients in circumstances like mine. And for all I know, I mean, they would have had some sort of nurse working in the background who would have, you know, pulled through and saved the day, but it wasn't going to be the blonde nurse who got me at the door. She wasn't going to do it. She really didn't care. I don't know if any of the staff there, except for the one, like that one lady who got me the second time when I finally went in, nobody else was particularly friendly and nobody else seemed like they cared. So yeah, you know, it was not a good experience. I think that's all for now. I will talk to you guys later.